Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here on Coptic Solidarity's 15th anniversary and also your policy day. I remember, they've been excellent throughout the years, so I'm really excited to be here, and it's wonderful to work with your team, Caroline and Lindsay. You guys are wonderful. And Ghada, and I could keep going. Without further ado, I think we're going to go straight into this panel, which is going to focus on North Africa. As you heard, I'm half Sudanese and also lived in Egypt, also prior to the time I was in the volunteer work. I wanted to just read a quote from a Christian ex-Muslim. He's from Saudi Arabia, but I think it represents the views of many Christians and other minorities. You could put in any minority. But he says, "My dream is to have the freedom to live as a Christian in my home country." And I think this is what everyone wants, the freedom to live their belief, their identity in their home country. And I also want to say that from my time in Egypt, I've also seen that the Coptic society has played a big role in Egypt. I heard about how Copts have been very helpful in helping vulnerable people. They have places where they help drug addicts and people who are marginalized in society. So Copts play a huge role in society. You build Egypt and you make Egypt, and you're not just a side. So I think by your lives, Egypt should recognize, or the government should recognize what key role the Copts play, and persecuting them is hurting Egypt. So I'm really honored to have Dr. Abdelbari here. I actually first heard about you, when I heard about the repeal of the apostasy law in Sudan, and I just wanted to read a little short thing here that my dad wrote when he got the news that it had been repealed. If I can find it. If I don't, then I'll just keep going. But basically, someone had written to my dad and said that, that it had been repealed and that you played a key role in that, and that we need to show support for the transitional government. Unfortunately, then later in October 2021, after a lot of positive changes in Sudan, the military coup happened. And now we see that 9.1 million people have been internally displaced in Sudan, many who have fled to Egypt and to other areas, Chad and so forth. I'm going to just read your bio now as well. So, Nasruddin Abdelbari is a non-resident senior fellow with the NS Initiative at the Atlantic Council Rafiq Hariri Center and Middle East Programs, and was formerly Sudan's Minister of Justice, where he played that key role. In that capacity, he served as principal legal advisor to the Sudanese government, leading and directing Sudan's legal and justice reforms. He also participated in and contributed to the overall political reform and state restructuring efforts and processes in Sudan. Prior to his appointment as Minister of Justice in 2019, Abdelbari worked as consultant for the American Bar Association Rule of Law Initiative, as a legal advisor to the Saudi Arabian Cultural Mission to the United States, and as a research consultant for the Center for Advanced Defense Studies in Washington. And he holds a Bachelor of Laws with honors and a Master's of Laws from the University of Cairo, where he won 9 academic distinctions. And I could go on, and I know you've played a role both within civil society and within the transitional government, so have those two very unique experiences. And then I have here Mr. Rashid Hamimi, originally from Morocco, and best known as Brother Rashid. And I've heard of you a lot because I grew up in Jordan, and I know a lot of met with converts, and many said, "Oh, it was because I was watching Al Hayat TV and watching your show." And now he has a new show that's called Let's Be Clear, and it's watched by over millions of people worldwide, and I think even people are watching reruns of the shows, and they've had a big impact. He's a former Muslim, a convert to Christianity, whose father is an imam. He's a Christian apologist and critic of Islam and hosts weekly shows. You're going to be speaking about Algeria, and it's an honor to have you on this panel. You know, if anyone, about the situation for Christian converts in these areas and for Christians in general. And you also have an insight in what motivates or how people justify the violence against Christians and how we can address it. So I welcome you, first Dr. Abdelbari, to share a little bit about Sudan briefly before we go into questions, and then also Mr. Hamami about Algeria.
All right, thank you so much for this kind introduction. It is my pleasure to be part of this advocacy effort, and I am very happy to see the Coptic community gather here in the United States to advocate for fundamental human rights. The parts that I would like to share about Sudan is actually related to the struggle for building a state that accommodates every person and every group in Sudan. We all know that Sudan is a very diverse country. We have more than 500 ethnic groups. We have, of course, Muslims, but we have Christians in the central part of the country, in the northern part of the country, and they are basically Coptics. And we have Christians in the western and southern part of the country. In the Nuba Mountains, we have people who also follow African religions and belief systems. In the southern part of the country, in Blue Nile, we have people who are also Christians and follow African religions and traditions. But since 1983, Sudan announced Sharia as the formal law of the country, and the conditions of human rights deteriorated as a result. And in 1989, as you know, the National Islamic Front took power in a military coup that was actually a turning point for the Sudanese people. Because all the laws were actually Islamized, and we had a new law in 1991 that was the Criminal Act, and in Article 126 of that act, apostasy became a crime. And many actually Christians or new Christians actually who became, who were Muslims, but also people who were Muslims and did not agree with the dominant version of Islam that was actually upheld by the National Islamic Front were actually criminalized. Some of them were punished, some of them were detained. Many of them actually were forced to leave the country and come to the US, go to African countries. Many of the Coptic community members left actually to other places, including Uganda. And I remember in 2008, I met a person actually who owned a hotel and a restaurant. He was from Greece. And the restaurant was actually very attractive to many Sudanese because of the food. It was similar to Sudanese food. And I asked the owner, why did you leave Sudan? And he said to me, I didn't want to leave Sudan, but I decided to leave Sudan because of the Sharia law, because Sharia was applied and I had no option but to leave the country. The story actually shows, and also the history of Sudan in general, shows how the adoption of a specific religion or identity in general by the state can actually cause problems to citizens and to religious minorities, but also to ethnic and cultural minorities. In 2019, we had a historic opportunity to actually shift the direction of the country and build a new Sudan, a secular Sudan that could actually protect and respect the fundamental rights of all the Sudanese people, regardless of their religion, ethnicity, or culture. But in October 2021, 2 years after the revolution, the military, which is actually controlled by the Islamists, staged a military coup, and they undermined all the efforts that we were actually exerting to build a new state, including by reforming the criminal act of 1991 in 2020. And after that, many of us from the civil society or from the political community struggled to actually confront the coup, and thanks to pressure, internal pressure, but also international pressure, including from the US, from Norway, from the UK, and many other countries, we started a process to re-establish a transition or a government that could continue the transition and establish a democratic state. And we were about to finalize the process in April 2023. At that point, the Islamists decided to actually start a war, and the war is continuing until today. So the whole story of Sudan, despite the many stories that people can actually read here in newspapers or elsewhere, it is about establishing a state that could actually respect the freedoms of all the citizens, and how to actually de-Islamize the state, how to reform the laws, how to dismantle the regime that the Islamists have established since 1989. I think this is what I could actually share with the participants, and I look forward to the questions.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I come not only as someone concerned about religious liberty, but also as a son of North Africa, a land with deep spiritual roots, a Berber of origin, and a convert from Islam to Christianity, who went through persecution. I have lived it firsthand. Before Islam arrived in the 7th century, Algeria was a vibrant center of early Christianity. Men like Augustine of Hippo, one of the greatest theologians in church history, lived and wrote in what is now called Algeria. The land was dotted with churches, bishops, and thriving Christian communities for centuries. And before either Christianity or Islam, the indigenous Berber people, my people, lived with a strong sense of identity and freedom. The very word Amazigh, which we use for ourselves, means free men. It is a proud identity rooted in independence, dignity, and resilience. But things have changed. Today, the land that once gave birth to the greatest thinkers and embraced religious diversity has become a place of religious persecution. Algeria's current laws treat Christians as criminals for peacefully practicing their faith. This is not just a legal issue, it is a moral and human crisis. My goal today is to shed light on how it's called Ordinance 0603 of 2006, systematically restricts religious freedom in Algeria, and to share the real-time consequences for believers on the ground. The law 0603, it requires authorization for worship. Under this law, all non-Muslims must have an approval by a special national commission, but the commission never meets. It has become a tool of silence, not dialogue. As a result, most churches are not legally recognized. And you know, in Algeria, those churches are not from the past, they are just churches for new converts from Islam to Christianity. The Kabyle, especially the Kabyle people, they found their identity in Christianity, not in Islam. So churches were closed and sealed. Even praying in a home or meeting outdoors is criminalized in Algeria now. Article 5 through 9 require registration of any worship space, pre-approval of any modification to those spaces. As executive decrees demand advance notice of all religious events 5 days beforehand with full names and full details. In practice, it leads to delays, denials, and de facto bans Christian gatherings. Article 11 of the same law makes it a crime to attempt to convert a Muslim, distribute Christian literature, even peacefully or privately. Penalties include up to 3 years in prison and fines up to $4,000 equivalent in Algerian currency. And also up to 5 years and $1 million currency in Algeria, which means $8,000 for pastors and leaders. This law essentially bans evangelism entirely. Christians have been persecuted for printing, storing, or even owning religious materials that might be seen by Muslims. The penalties for these things are severe, up to 5 years in prison, fines up to 1 million Algerian dinar, which is equivalent to $8,000. A Bible in the wrong place became a crime in Algeria. Article 144, offending the Prophet or Islamic values, punishable by 3 to 5 years in prison. Article 160, desecrating the Quran, 5 to 10 years in prison. These laws are vague, selectively enforced laws often used to silence peaceful Christian expressions. Real-time situation. Before I came here, I texted my friend, Pastor Yusuf in Algeria, to make sure of the numbers I have, and he confirmed all of them. He's still there. 58 churches forcibly closed, most since 2019, only one still standing. 0 Christians in prison, but there are many of them having convictions against them and appealing them in Supreme Court. So far, no one in prison, but they have prison sentences against them. They might go to prison soon. They are being harassed, interrogated, and followed. 32 individuals currently have active legal sentences against them. Travel bans, detainment at airports, phone surveillance, home visits, and pastors being forced into exile. Conclusion. This law, Ordinance 0603, is not just a bureaucratic obstacle, it is a calculated tool of oppression, systematic oppression by the regime. It criminalizes the most basic expressions of Christian faith: to gather, to read scripture, to speak of Jesus, or to be free. Algeria today is betraying its legacy, both the Christian heritage of its soil and the free spirit of the Berber people, the Amazigh. So I call you, all of you, lawmakers, diplomats, advocates of human rights, to demand religious freedom protection in Algeria for our Christian brothers and sisters, to urge the repeal of Ordinance 0603, to stand with the persecuted, to give them a voice. Freedom of conscience is not a Western value, it is a human value. And the Christians of Algeria, like all people of faith, deserve the freedom to live and worship in peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both Dr. Abdulbari and Mr. Hamimi. Very powerful words, and true that freedom of conscience is a human value. It's not limited to this area of the world. As we've seen, people follow their conscience, and it's a human right. I wanted to just touch on Sudan again. Sudan was able to repeal or to create a kind of secular, but then of course the military came in. But how is it when you're able to repeal the law? There's still the cultural pressure, but how were you able to go? What helped you bring about that change, and what were the pushbacks that you met, or how? And do you think it's possible to do it in other countries to repeal the Islamic laws?
Thank you so much for the question. The vast majority of Sudanese who are Muslim, we have about maybe 80% or 85% Muslim population. They are not actually radical, and most of them are Sufis. Many of them, of course, as in many Muslim countries, do not even practice Islam. But as it is the case in many Muslim countries, there is always an organized group of Muslims who have a particular political understanding of Islam, and they always try to impose that version on all Muslims. And this is not actually against, of course, the non-Muslims when they apply Sharia or Muslim laws. It is also against the Muslims who do not actually agree with them. So I was working as a human rights activist, and I was also teaching at the University of Khartoum. I was teaching international law. So I knew that the picture that we had about Sudan internationally was not actually what we had in Sudan when you go and interact with the ordinary Muslims. And I think my confrontation was not with the Sudanese in general, not with the general public. It was with a group of Islamists who were actually ruling the country for 3 decades, and they were removed from power by a revolution that was supported by 80% of the Sudanese people across the country, from the north to the south, from the east to the west. So I wasn't worried, although the elites, the political elites, even the secular political elites, were actually very hesitant to actually support the discussions that I held in the beginning with them for reforming the Criminal Act, and for also in particular repealing Article 126, in addition to other articles that were inconsistent with international human rights. I was motivated by my convictions as a human rights activist who became a minister. Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and also Article 18 of the Universal Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Both speak about, freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, and these were things that I believed in, and they motivated me to actually take that action. I also thought of many groups of Christians, especially from the Nuba Mountains, who came to the Ministry of Justice in the early days of my tenure, and who expressed their interest in working with the ministry to ensure that laws were not against minorities who were actually not only in the Nuba Mountains but also in other places in Khartoum, Coptic. We had a Coptic community also in Niala, in the west, in the north, everywhere. there were minorities that needed to be protected. I also read a lot for a Sudanese thinker, Mahmoud Muhammad Taha, who was actually executed because of, of the Islamic, laws that were advocated by the Muslim Brotherhood against his understanding of Islam. He did not even declare, converting to another religion, but he had a particular different understanding of Islam, and they, because of that, declared him an apostate, and he was killed for a political reason. Although the person who actually led the campaign, Hassan al-Turabi, if you read his books, he actually argues that changing a religion or converting to another religion is not a crime and should not be a crime. But he used the opinions that were actually argued by other Muslim scholars to actually get rid of a person who became a competitor, a political competitor. So these are maybe the main two reasons that motivated me to actually take that action, and I was not afraid to do that at all.
What role did the international pressure play in getting that from outside?
No international pressure. As far as I am concerned, as a minister, nobody actually spoke to me about, reforming the laws. I was motivated by my own convictions as an academic, as a person who was a human rights activist, as a person who morally believes in the personal freedom of everybody to actually convert to another religion or to embrace another religion.
And now we'll go back to Algeria. The ordinance is from 2006, but they started implementing it even more, I think, in the last decade, or would you say, 7 years? Okay. So what do you think was the result? Why did it, because we've seen pictures of the Algerian churches, they were open, they were thriving. And you mentioned some ways that we can already support is to call for the repeal of that ordinance. Are any other recommendations? And also, what pressure points would work towards the Algerian authorities, or what do you think kind of pushed them to change the freedoms that they were giving initially, or temporary freedoms they were giving?
I think, first of all, to reply to your first part of the question, the change of regime. We know we had Bouteflika in Algeria, then Tebboune came after. Tebboune is very hostile to Christianity. I heard from some local pastors, they told me, it's not officially written anywhere. I looked for it, but I couldn't find it. But I heard from locals there, he said, I will get rid of the sons of France. So he called those Christians like the kids of France. So he sees them as loyal to the Western culture more than they are loyal to their Algerian heritage. So he sees them as remnants of colonialism in Algeria. So to answer the second part of your question, we can help making pressure on Algeria through U.S. diplomacy, but also using Europe, because Algeria has more ties with Europe than the U.S., so we can use some countries there, probably try to convince them that it is good for Algeria, and I believe so, that it is good for Algeria and its image to give freedom of speech and freedom of religion to the Kabyles and to Christians or the people who converted from Islam to Christianity. The situation is very grim. There were churches that had thousands of people they attended. And the way they have done it, they have a recognized church from the days of France. They have a legal paper for it. It's the Protestant Church of Algeria. And under the Protestant Church of Algeria, they have branches in every city under the same paperwork. So they removed all the branches, they left just the mother church there. It's still functioning with limited freedoms, But I think they would close it soon too if we don't do anything. So people are afraid in their homes. They cannot do anything. They cannot speak. They cannot talk about their faith. So they don't know what's the future going to hold for them. So their only hope that somebody will intervene in their favor.
Thank you. And I saw that the former senator and current Secretary of State has spoken out on behalf of Pastor Youssef and also the Algerian Church, so that would be a point we could raise again with him. I think time is short, so I just ask that if you can provide some recommendations, Dr. Abdelbari, relating to Sudan, what people can do to help, and specifically for the minorities. I've heard some reports also of vulnerabilities for Christians fleeing persecution, where they've been not receiving aid or faced discrimination in some different areas. So what recommendations to keep the process that was started after the revolution?
Well, I think for the time being, it is very important to apply pressure on the warring parties to actually respect the freedoms and rights of all minorities, especially Christians, because they are maybe the smallest minority, so to speak. But I think for the long run, the problems that all minorities face in Sudan, including religious minorities, it is very important to create a state that does not adopt any religious, ethnic, or cultural identity. That means the state should be impartial, and it should respect all the identities of the country. That doesn't mean it should be or it could be neutral, because the state, because of its very nature, cannot be neutral. It should protect minorities who face issues not from the state, but from other groups within the state. The Muslim majority, for example, in the case of Sudan. So I think that is what we need in the long run, without having a state that is democratic, that accommodates diversity. The violations will continue, and we will not have laws that respect freedoms, fundamental freedoms and rights.
And finally, Mr. Hamami, with Algeria, there's also been a case with Hamid Soudad where he was sentenced to 5 years in prison for sharing a cartoon. That case, Algeria used a decision from the European Court of Human Rights to defend it, saying that religious sensitivities and so on. But first of all, it was wrong that they did that, and then this law was targeting a minority, targeting a minority within the country. But I wanted to hear a little bit, since you've been sharing on the show, do you see the responses from Muslims on the channel? Is there a change in mindset? Is there greater openness to accept people from different beliefs? I know it's not all Muslims, so we have to, but is there, because I know when we post about Algeria on Twitter, for example, some of the most harsh comments are from Algerians who are living abroad. Are Algerians within the country, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that. And then also final comments.
I have been doing my show since 2006 until now, so almost 20 years. The most engaging nations in the MENA region are Algeria first, Egypt second, Morocco third, Iraq fourth. It has been always the case since all these 20 years. So the most engaged people that I see with debates and discussion about religion, they come from these four countries. Algeria was doing better than any other country in North Africa. They had churches, they had Bibles, they had local translations, they had even a Bible society inside Algeria. Morocco was way behind, and now it's shifting. Morocco is more open than Algeria. Tunisia is still a little bit more open, but we don't see much activity there for some reasons. In Egypt, you know the situation, we talked a lot these 2 days about it. It's very complicated, and I think one of the most radical countries in the region. Even Saudis are opening up, but Egypt is going backwards. So Iraq can be open to a certain degree. We have to watch Yemen, Sudan, Syria, and other places. We have to keep an eye on them. But I think Algeria is going backwards, is in doing every effort to have religious freedom. In the 90s, they had priorities on the feasts, on the Jabhat al-Inqadh, on the Islamic group. But I think since they got rid of them, now priorities are changed. They see the Kurds as a problem, as a threat from within. So I don't know why they are shifting their policies there, so they're going backwards. But I think the rest of the region, I'm very optimistic about Morocco, about Tunisia. I'm not sure about Egypt and Algeria.
Thank you so much. I have a lot of questions still, but I know we have to wrap up. It's really been a pleasure to hear from you, and I think everyone here agrees, and I hope we can continue the conversation. Very great recommendations about the importance of a constitution that's based on equality, dignity, human rights. I think the basis of the revolution in Sudan, and also to call for the rights of minorities. So thank you so much. And I hope.
Testing.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so our next speaker needs no introduction. Mr. Raymond Ibrahim. Raymond is an expert on the Middle East and Islam, distinguished senior Shulman Fellow at the Gatestone Institute, and an associate director of the Middle East Forum. He's an author of many books, including the 2022 Defenders of the West, Christian Heroes Who Stood Against Islam. He served as an Arabic language and regional specialist at the Near East section of the Library of Congress. In 2011, he was promoted. He was producing a monthly report called Muslim Persecution of Christians since then, and it's always a pleasure having Raymond with us. So please welcome Raymond.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. So they put me last, and I know you're all tired. And the good news is everyone said everything I was going to say, so we're done. No, okay, I'll give you what I'd like to do is actually, we've heard a lot of recommendations and particular angles and issues, but let's go back to the beginning and talk about really what is the main issues with Egypt and the Copts. So what I'd like to do is a quick rundown of the year in review, as it were, and especially kind of home in on new trends, developing trends in the persecution, because they always have something new and exciting for us stored. So first of all, of course, is more of the usual that we get, which is the mob uprising, anger, violence, attacks, and the most recent one, if you go on the Coptic Solidarity website, which I write for, the most recent one I think was 2 weeks ago, somewhere in Minya, where they burned Coptic homes, and they were angry because a Coptic man, I think he got a permit to put some sort of mobile apparatus on his roof, and all of a sudden that triggered them. And it triggers them, of course, because somehow he's trying to improve himself, he's trying to be better than them. It actually goes back to Sharia, where there's stipulations about a Christian can't have a house higher than a Muslim's house. And if you even doubted that that was a religious uprising, the Muslims made sure to scream out Allahu Akbar. All right, so it was definitely they were underscoring the religious aspect, obviously. And what was actually good about that, if you've seen that particular one, the one I'm talking about from about 2 weeks ago, I forget the name, someone can tell me if they know the name of the city, I think it's in Minya. But someone videotaped it, a woman videotaped it, I guess with her phone, and you can hear the terror in her voice and how just utterly traumatizing this entire event is as she watches her property burn, as she watches Muslim men, women, and children screaming and looting and stealing. And so I think it was when you read a lot of, as I do, and you probably do, and you encounter these stories, and they become just very kind of dry and factual. But in this particular case, I found it very interesting because you could hear the woman's terror And that's how they all are. We just don't get that because we usually just read a small story about it. So anyway, that's the Muslim mob uprisings are still alive and well. And then, of course, the entrenched discrimination. So, for example, past Easter, I think Holy Week, Easter week, 1 or 2 of those days, universities made it a point to schedule exams, even though those are Christian holidays. And then, of course, conversely, when Ramadan was in effect, the whole school was shut down, all of them. And that caused problems. And the dearth of churches and the sort of overall discrimination was such that it caused yet another Coptic funeral to be held in the streets. Imagine people, because they're deprived of churches, they have to bury their loved ones in the street and have funerary rites in that kind of context. How demeaning, how degrading, but that's the point. So that sort of thing is alive and well. And another one of the new developments, of course, is Egypt appointed a new Grand Mufti, whose name is, I'm forgetting, Muhammad or other, a Grand Mufti. Yeah, that one. And if you dig into his background, you find, of course, one of his famous books, I think the equivalent of a dissertation from his academic background, is an attack on Christianity, the Trinity specifically. And the short and long of the whole book is that Christians are ultimately kuffar. So this is the Grand Mufti of Egypt, which tries to put on a moderate face. And this man, behind the scenes, has written a treatise about how the Christians, the Copts, are kuffar, are infidels. And as you know, if you are labeled a kafir, that immediately puts you on the role of you're an enemy. You're someone who's to be fought, discriminated, subjugated, and kept down. So that's the new Grand Mufti. And speaking of course, Al-Azhar also this past year published a book republished the book, rededicated entirely to destroying churches in Egypt. The thesis is that churches have no belonging in Egypt. And it was written by some sheikh from maybe 200 years ago, but they reissued it and republished it with a new introduction and a new foreword. And keep in mind, Al-Azhar is who Pope Francis would meet with Ahmed al-Tayyib, Sheikh Ahmed al-Tayyib, before he passed away. And they would hug and kiss and talk about fraternal love, et cetera, and this is what they're doing behind the scenes. So, this is the reality of it. But of more interest, and lately, so some sort of new trends that we can mention, is, if I reflect on it, because I've followed this particular topic for so long, is attacks on churches in Egypt, and all throughout the Muslim world, but in Egypt specifically, were very common, as you know. I mean, of course, historically, we can go back and talk about thousands of churches being attacked, but in the modern era, I believe Megdi has given the number, Megdi Khalil has given the number of, tens of thousands of churches since the modern era, let's say in the 60s, okay, in the 70s, have been attacked in one way or the other, many of them torched. And we're all familiar with this, and there's always, whatever the pretext is, Muslims uprise and attack churches for whatever reason, but something like maybe 5-6 years ago, it stopped. And it was nice, and you thought that was good. And then all of a sudden, it started again with more churches burning, but in this time, every single one of them is an accident. And you don't see Muslims rioting, and you don't see anything. It just happens. So the conclusion is either something nefarious is happening, it's business as usual, but under a new guise, a more subtle guise, or the Coptic people are the most fire-prone accident people on the face of this earth. Even though you would think they'd want to be very careful with their churches because their churches are so embattled and few in number, apparently of all the people in the world, they keep making fires in their churches. So I don't know which sounds more plausible to you. And but to help understand the meaning of it, keep this in mind also. Mosques and prayer halls, which outnumber Coptic churches in Egypt by 60-to-1 ratio, are seldom ever catch fire or burn. So maybe in Egypt, even the circuits and the faulty wires are radical too. I don't know. And they're burning churches. So that's another, and the reason I actually want to point this out is because it seems like the sort of radical attacks and that sort of thing are becoming more sophisticated. Instead of waiting on the rabble to do it and then exposing yourself, I don't know, are these the authorities? Are they in cahoots with the radical sheikhs? What's going on? And so in 1 month alone, I think in 2023, when this issue started, 9 or 10 churches burned in one summer. And in one of them, 41 Copts were burned alive. And since then, the most recent one, I think, was 10 days ago, another church. And then before that one was maybe 2-3 weeks, another church in Egypt. And before that was maybe 3 weeks. So this is an ongoing thing. There's more, churches are burning now more than when actual jihadists and Islamists would rise up against them. And it just, makes you wonder. It just shows you how I think things are becoming a little more clandestine and sophisticated. And in that sense, I think we can also associate. Oh, what for you? Yeah, this is better? I don't know. Should I talk with this one or this? Is this good? Okay. So the other one is actually the abduction of women that we've heard a lot about, the abduction, Islamization, etc. When you really think about it, that too, like the ongoing burning of churches, which has become more subtle and more sophisticated, has really taken on a very sophisticated, almost systematic way of being done. And I think also it includes authorities and all these different rings that focus, and it's become an art, is my point. These things are becoming so subtle and so much more systematic, and obviously have a hand, I would argue, from the authorities. The constant abduction of girls. And one of the things that I think is very important to keep in mind, when you talk about all these things that we're talking about, the abduction of the women, and you think about the authorities and the police and the governor type people, and you wonder, like, why are they acquiescing? Why do they cooperate? Why do they turn a blind eye? And I think what we have to remember and keep in mind is that from their worldview, they're all the good guys. What they're doing is actually good. When they abduct a girl and they forcibly Islamize her, in their mind, this is good. They're altruistic. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, because if you don't, you think that what they're doing is so evil in their mind, and how do they have the conscience to do this? But they actually have a clear conscience. And that's why maybe the policeman knows that this girl was abducted, but he's going to turn a blind eye, because this is better for her. She's going to become a true Muslim and not have to live as some foul infidel, okay? Or even in the Pakistani example, where they had the police authority saying, inshallah, God willing, she won't go back to her parents. Because in his mind, because now she's a good Muslimah. She doesn't have to go back to being a kafir who's going to hell. I always think this is an important element to keep in mind, and it's a sad element, because it underscores why this issue is going to be so pervasive, because you're dealing with the people who are doing something negative, but in their minds, they're the good guys. So that's obviously very problematic. But the last thing I'll talk about, which again is also one of these new subtle sort of trends, except it blew up in their face, is the St. Catherine Monastery, which is very recently, just happened May 29th. So May 29th, ironically, is when the news came out that an Egyptian court had ruled that St. Catherine Monastery, which is the oldest functioning monastery in history, which has been there functioning with monks since about a century before Muhammad was born and Islam came into play, and which is a UNESCO protected site, which means this site belongs to humanity as a cultural heritage. It doesn't belong to any one particular country. And Egypt on May 29th decided, no, this is our land and we can do whatever we want. And, at least the Greek government and the Greek patriarchs and the religious hierarchy really got angry and responded. And many people don't understand, but his name is, I think, Patriarch Hieronymus. What's that? Yeah, the Patriarch of Athens and all Greece. And he made a remark, and he said, I can't believe today of all days, orthodoxy is being attacked again. And his point, of course, is May 29th, when this new information came out, is when another great Orthodox cathedral was attacked and taken over by Muslims, which is the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. And they're both built by Justinian in the 6th century, and they're both UNESCO cultural sites. And one in Turkey, and again, Turkey took it over and turned it into a mosque again, after it had been a museum. And even though Istanbul has 3,000 mosques, apparently they need one more. And now Egypt is doing the same thing. But of course, after this backlash, Sisi came up with some kind of proclamation, basically saying, no, nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to change, it's the same status quo. But according to some people, that's all lies, and this is just, he's trying to diffuse the situation and just cover it up and go away. And apparently what he's trying to do, it's another move to help improve the image of Islam in Egypt, the overall Islamization of Egypt. If you're unaware, under Sisi, he's creating what's called Islam City, or Islam Mission City, which is a major city dedicated just to the teaching and propagating of Islamic religion. I don't know, where is it, New Cairo? It's somewhere, it's on massive ground and lots of acres, and they're building it, and it's gonna give scholarships to Muslims from all around the world, and they're gonna come and be indoctrinated from Al-Azhar and then unleashed on the world to go back to their land. So definitely there's this Islamization program going on with Sisi, and I think this St. Catherine thing fits in it, because what he'll probably do is he'll keep the monastery as a monastery. It's old, it's dilapidated, but he's going to surround it with the glories of Islam. And so it will be a reminder that, yes, this cathedral or St. Catherine Monastery is representative of the old religions, Judaism, Christianity, Moses, Christianity, etc. And then it's going to be surrounded with the glories of new Islam, the final revelation. So that's probably up his sleeve, and that's what he's trying to do. And, you know, I guess the only good news is this, because that church is it's not run by the Copts. The world actually heard about it and cared, because it's more of a European Greek Orthodox thing, and they made enough noise to embarrass him. So we'll see where that goes. But overall, that's, I think, what's been going on is, you know, this kind of trend where the same sort of radicalization exists and the same sorts of problems, but they're becoming a lot more sophisticated. You know, the church thing where I'm telling you they just catch fire constantly. You can even see surveillance tapes where a candle is just sitting there and then it blows up. And apparently, so maybe, are they selling them candles that are booby-trapped or something to that effect? I've never seen a people who have so few churches, but they keep having accidental fires in them constantly. And that's been a big thing in the last 2 years, especially this year. Like I said, this year it seems every 3 weeks there's a new one, and the largest one was just in June, so maybe a week ago at most. So that's the current situation in Egypt, and what we're all talking about and what we're all trying to ameliorate, and that's where it's at right now. And I think that's the fact that it's becoming a little more subtle, both in the church issue and, because these have always been the big issues, is the church issue and the women issue, the abduction issues, and they're both taking on a much more professional guise, and I think that's by design and intention, and it's a lot more dangerous. And, you know, again, keeping in mind that in their minds, they're the good guys. They don't think they're doing anything wrong. They think it's kind of, to them, you know, the end justifies the mean. And the end is, I've made this person a good Muslim, or I've gotten rid of an infidel church. So the means, which are of less than just, kind of just, they just look them over. It doesn't matter. So, yeah, I figured I'd be the last guy here, and I'd be the one to depress you the most, so we can end it on that kind of note. And there it is. Thank you.
All right. So before I close, I want to have Lindsay come up. She has a few words to share with us.
All right, everybody who's still here, you're troopers, 2 long days. Thank you for joining us. We're gonna have a PowerPoint. So I'm here, just like last year, to give you an update on what we've done in the last year. So basically, since last June was our conference. It was titled The Coptic Problem, Hate Based on Religion. It was hosted in this very same room, and we have Congressman French Hill to thank for getting us this room yet again. He really is a champion, yes. So a few highlights of our work from the past year. Some of these you've probably heard a little bit about during various presentations, but I want to kind of give you a picture of what it is that we feel like we have achieved in the past year. One of the biggest things is the report that Sonia Dahlmans wrote, Hidden Crimes, Public Deception, the Epidemic of Abductions and Forced Disappearance of Coptic Women and Girls. What is different about this report, as opposed to Jihad the Womb, which we published several years ago, is that it sheds light on the evolving tactics of Muslim traffickers and the groups who target Coptic women and minor girls. It really looks into targeting of especially vulnerable people, of women maybe who have mental health issues or physical health issues. She paints a very clear picture of why these women are the ones who are targeted. So Jihad of the Womb was our first report that, that covered trafficking, and is basically the report that is most utilized by the United Nations, by different governments, our own government, and legislators. I believe very soon this new report will be in that same position. Sonia was able to come from the Netherlands, so we want to thank all of the supporters who donated to help bring her here. Her participation is really important. Yeah. Speaking of the report as well, I want to acknowledge that we have several executive committee members, that's our board members, who volunteer their time and their expertise. And we have several, including Radha here, who spent a lot of time helping with translations and interviews and just did so much to make the report possible. Yeah. Another thing I want to mention is that, yes. Another thing I would like to mention is you've seen a lot of the folks from Jubilee Campaign with us yesterday and today. Joseph from Jubilee Campaign Netherlands, as well as Sydney and Hulda from Jubilee Campaign USA. Yeah. Some of the most selfless partners that you will ever meet. The event we had yesterday, which was the joint congressional briefing, that was really possible because we have been hosting a number of joint side events up in New York, particularly during the Commission on Status of Women. So this wasn't just something that came together all of a sudden. It's been a growing partnership, bringing in other organizations. That's actually how we met Jamila as well, from the Canadian Yazidi organization. So one of the things that we worked on was we joined with a lot of other organizations to lobby for a change in language on the annual resolution on child and early forced marriage. This last November, language was added, explicitly highlights the need to address impunity surrounding abductions, trafficking, and forced religious conversions of women and girls by armed groups, and what's different and other non-state actors. That's what happens in Egypt and in Pakistan. It's not always armed groups. That was the key that we were able to have added. So we're starting to build momentum. The report that Sonia wrote has opened some new opportunities for us. One of those is that a Dutch parliamentarian utilized the report to present questions. There was also a group of parliamentarians at the European Union who also cited our report and submitted formal questions. So that means that it's getting out there and it's going to continue to get more traction, I believe. You've heard from Mark, so y'all know that Mark has done incredible research for us. He's also helped us at the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. So this last year was our third time going since we've gotten our ECOSOC status, which is our nonprofit status. And it's a whole deal trying to get to give a speech, because you can't just sign up online for this forum. You have to stand in line. And typically people who fly all the way to New York will have to stand in line or sit in the hallway for hours to get your name on a list to maybe get to give a 3-minute speech. Thanks to our Syrian partners, Carmela got in line, and because of that, Mark was able to give our first speech at the UN Permanent Forum. Yeah. I hope you're seeing a theme here, which is none of this would have happened without all of our partners, and so we really do appreciate everything. The speech that Mark gave, 3-minute speech, an Egyptian delegate responded to his speech the very same day. Oh, you're seeing pictures of it, yes. You need to watch it. It's on our website. It's on our YouTube channel. It's very telling. Other things we did while we were at the UN is particularly just meeting with different UN country missions, creating awareness about our work, building relationships with different governments. All of that comes together to continue giving us opportunities to advocate. Another thing that we do, you're probably familiar with, every year we write an analysis of both the State Department's International Religious Freedom Report as well as the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, their Egypt chapter. Because of our annual analyses, the reports are getting better. You know, several years ago, they didn't include anything about the missing Coptic women. Now they do. That's because of our consistent analyses saying you need to include this is happening, this is a big problem. I'm happy to say that in the last State Department report on Egypt, they addressed every single point of criticism that we made. That's never happened. 15-year anniversary, yeah. Yeah. That was very exciting. We continue to do our meetings and our outreach with members of Congress. We are a nonpartisan, secular organization. Not everyone understands that. We don't have we don't have any kind of affiliation with political parties. And I hope that you saw that we had a number of members of Congress who spoke yesterday and today from both parties. So we continue to develop those relationships. Thank you to everyone who came to the lobbying meetings with us. I should say legislative meetings. But basically, all together with our partners, we had 2 days of meetings where we were able to share joint policy asks. And a lot of it was focused on foreign influence, but we also had a pamphlet that we put together, just say a booklet actually, that included information on Copts, Assyrians, and Yazidis with specific asks for each, and then our joint asks. So I think that we're moving in the right direction in terms of partnering and also giving more concrete things for members of Congress to look into doing. Combating foreign influence, we had a whole session on that, so I don't really need to cover it a whole lot. I would like to say, though, a big thank you to Christine, who came to speak. The influence, I would like to say that it extends to clergy, to religious leaders, nonprofit leaders, legislators, and government officials. There's transnational repression. Most Copts are too scared to speak, and a lot of them have good reasons to be. So we had somebody pull out a witness because of that, and we're really grateful that Christine came, and that shows a lot of bravery. Hopefully that will encourage other people to participate. So this work requires a lot of partnering and coalition building. We thank all of our partners. Another thing that we do is the monitoring and reporting on systematic discrimination, attacks on Copts and their properties. I won't go into that a lot because Raymond just spoke about it and he is one of our writers, but essentially, I would say one of the most important things our organization does is a lot of the information is only in Arabic. So a Western audience doesn't really understand what's happening. And then you add to that a lot of news is on Facebook in Arabic. So you can imagine like a Western audience just really doesn't know, oh, this girl disappeared, or there's just so many things that are reported. So Coptic Solidarity Team, and this is volunteered by our board members as well as people like Raymond, are the ones who make it possible to provide that information to government officials. Otherwise, in our audience, no one would really understand what's happening. And then the last thing I want to mention is that, and it's an opportunity, if you have young people in your family who are interested in interning or volunteering, not necessarily just young people, but I'm thinking internship, of course. We've had our most diverse group of interns this last year. We had a high school student from Texas who's interned with us, Ria Dutta, and also we had another one, Ladia Kong, who is Burmese but was studying in high school in Boston, and she also has volunteered her time with us. So we have some very interesting people, and they've made a really huge difference. So if people have anyone in your family or your contacts that are interested in interning, please have them contact us. We can always use the help. So everyone, thank you so much for joining our conference. I want to make one last announcement. If you rode here on the